Are we live, Catherine? Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to this licensing subcommittee. Before we start, we now need to elect a chair for the meeting. Do I have a proposal from one of the members of the subcommittee, please?
Hello, I'm happy to propose Councillor Les Fry.
And I'm happy to second that.
Thank you both. That's very kind of you. Right, we'll now do some introductions so everybody knows, and I'm going to go around the whole room so everybody knows who's here, okay, this afternoon. I am Councillor Les Fry, representing Dorchester West.
I'm Councillor Andrew Starr, representing Upton and Litchett.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Sarah Williams, representing Bridport.
Thank you. I'll now ask the council officers to introduce themselves, please. We'll start with the legal advisor and work around the room.
Hello, I'm Phil Crowther. I'm the subcommittee's legal advisor.
John Miles, Democratic Services. I'll be taking the minutes for this meeting. Thank you.
Hello, Elaine Tibble, also Democratic Services.
Roy Keepax, Senior Licensing Officer and author of the report.
Aileen Powell, Licensing Team Leader.
Good afternoon. My name is Ewan McGregor. I'm from TLT and I represent the applicant. And to my left, I have Jeremy Lee, who will be managing Sherborne House. And to my right, I have Stefan Pittman, who has been involved in the project since 2018 as an architect, lead designer, and has been liaising with Dorset Council, Historic England, and has been managing the work on site.
Thank you very much. Members of the public, would you like to introduce yourselves, please, and say who you are?
I'm Wendy Oswald. I'm a concerned neighbour from One Manor House Stables.
And Graham Oswald, One Manor House Stables.
Catherine Ballasat, Two Manor House Stables.
Thank you much, everybody. And so everybody knows that. And at the back of the room, we've got Councillor John Andrews, the ward member, sitting in and observing and making sure I do a good job here. Thank you, everybody. I'll try and be fair to everybody as we go through this, and everybody will have a chance to speak, and we'll go through a process, okay? Do we have any apologies?
Apologies for absence were received from Mike Dyer, substituted by Councillor Sarah Williams. Thank you.
Do either of the councillors, any of the councillors have declarations of interest? No, none declared. Thank you. Do we have any urgent business?
There are no urgent items. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Very good. I'm now going to ask the report author, Roy Keepax, on behalf of the council to outline the application, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This hearing is to consider a new premises licence for Sherborne House in Sherborne. The application is for the supply of alcohol on and off the premises, plays indoors and outdoors, films indoors and outdoors, indoor sporting events, live and recorded music, again indoors and outdoors, performances of dance indoors and outdoors, and anything of a similar description to that falling in E, F or G, indoors and outdoors. The times for all of these are Monday to Sunday, 10 a.m. till 1 o'clock in the morning. And then the last one is late night refreshment, which is indoors only, Monday to Sunday, 2300 to 0100. You will find the application along with the plans at Appendix 1 of the report. There were no representations received from any of the responsible authorities. There was a request for an additional condition from the Council's Environmental Protection Team to be added to the operating schedule, which was agreed to by the applicant, and this can be found at Appendix 2 of the report. There were 3 relevant representations received from interested parties, which can be found at Appendix 3. Following these representations, mediation letters were sent to all interested parties, and a copy of this letter can be found at Appendix 4. There was a revised version of the operating schedule that was submitted as supplementary information. This was due to errors in some of the wordings that were used, so it's more of a tidy up, but this is obviously being submitted as part of the supplementary information. The options available to members are to grant the licence subject to such conditions as the authority considers appropriate for the promotion. Yeah, okay. Sorry. So I'll start again. So the options available to the members are to grant the licence subject to such conditions as the authority considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives and the mandatory conditions, or to exclude from the scope of the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates, refuse to specify a person in the licence as the designated premises supervisor, or to reject the application. That's all.
Thank you, Roy. Questions, colleagues? I have one. I've seen in the notes of the objections that there was a question about the display of the notice at the time. Can you tell me about that, please?
Yes, I can. Normally what happens is we work quite closely with the police licensing officer, and he does check on where the notices are, and he lets us know. I have contacted such police licensing officer. He confirmed that the notices were put up in the correct manner. I was also sent a couple of pictures from one of the representors, and again, that only further showed that the notices were displayed in the correct manner as in accordance with the law. Again, today we have been shown further ones. Again, they just show that they were put up in the correct places accordance with the law.
Thank you. And what is the law and what is the requirements for display of notices, please?
They need to be on blue paper, a certain font, which I believe is size 16, I believe. They also need to be on or near the premises where they are readable, and in certain circumstances, depending on the size of the area, they need to be every 50 metres, which we know that it was all complied with.
I know there was a comment in the paper that the notice was placed on the front gates of the premises, which meant that when the gates were open, the notices couldn't be seen. Does that count as properly displayed, please?
Yes, and from what we've seen and found out from the applicant, as they can confirm, there was actually 4 notices put up, which really they probably only needed to do 2, so there was more than there should have been.
Thank you very much. Very good. Right, we're now going to go over to the applicant at the moment and tell us your case, please.
Good afternoon, and if I'm not close enough to the mic, then you'll no doubt you'll tell me, but hopefully you can hear me. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be able to present this application to you as a committee. I know that you are an experienced committee. I have sent some supplementary documents, which I think appear in your bundle, and I sent through some submissions to the committee, which have been circulated, and I think that they appear on your website as well. I'm not going to read them, you'll be relieved to hear, but I'm going to follow the format of the submissions to take you through to sort of to tell you the story of Sherborne House, and so that you understand what it is that we are applying for and why we are applying for it. If you have any questions, I will try and answer them, but if I can't, Mr. Lee, who will have day-to-day management of Sherborne, will be able to assist you. If not, then Mr. Pittman will, because he's been involved in this project for much longer than I have. I had the opportunity and indeed pleasure of going to visit the premises this morning. They are clearly still a building site. They are looking to open in April next year. But suffice it to say that it is an impressive building. You'll know the building. It's an impressive building. And it will be, when it opens, I'm sure, a hugely impressive venue. The applicant is Sherborne House Trust Limited, and that is the commercial arm of Sherborne House Trust. Sherborne House Trust 2018, a charity registered with the Charity Commission, and it was set up by Michael Cannon, and the whole concept behind Sherborne House is very much in his vision. Mr. Cannon was a very successful businessman and a philanthropist, and it was his desire to see Sherborne House brought back into public use for the benefit of the community of Sherborne and also the wider community within Dorset. And sadly, Mr. Cannon passed away earlier this year, and so he will never see the realisation of his vision and desire for these premises. But so far as the charity is concerned, it has two principal functions, and that is promoting and providing facilities for the participation in arts and fostering and promoting the improvement and development of artistic knowledge, understanding and appreciation of the arts. Now, Sherborne House is one of the most notable historic buildings within Sherborne. It is Grade 1 and Grade 2 listed and is on the Historic England Buildings at Risk Register and has remained largely vacant since 1992. Previous efforts to bring these premises back into public use sadly have failed or had to be abandoned due to lack of public funding. And that is unfortunate, but Mr. Cannon has stepped in. He purchased the premises in autumn 2018, and as I say, the premises is owned by the Sherborne House Trust and was acquired for £1.8 million. And the investment in the premises is 10 times that. So you can work out the maths from that. So it is a considerable investment to bring back into life a significant building within Sherborne. And all the work has been done with the full blessing of your planning authority. I've, for the sake of completeness, included a copy of the planning permission with the papers that we submitted to you and also the various heritage bodies. And within the papers that I've sent to you, it includes a mission statement, and the intention is to create a visual arts centre showcasing the best of artists and makers from the Southwest, major art exhibitions, interactive and engaging arts and cultural programmes, inclusive and accessible to everybody. And the Dorset Visual Arts has been appointed as the Sherborne's principal arts partner to devise and manage the programme. The programme will engage with all schools in the town, both state and private, together with other educational establishments in the region. Mr. Cannon, who is the founder of the Trust, was very keen on sculpture, and some of his private pieces will be displayed within the gardens of the premises. Now, I should say that as an arts centre, the premises will also embrace all performing arts in such mediums as live streaming of opera, theatre, and live performances of the same mediums. But a governing principle, and this is important, of the Trust is that it will be financially sustainable and self-sufficient without relying on public sector grants or being dependent on regular fundraising. And to enable that to happen, the premises needs to provide various commercial activities. And so there is an 80-seat bistro restaurant on the ground floor, there is a cocktail bar, and there will be functions. And I'll come on to the hours that we have applied for because the functions and the hours fall hand in hand. And then at the upper levels, there are further function rooms, there are business meeting rooms, there are rooms that are available for letting for small businesses. And in fact, one of the rooms has already been let to somebody who is looking to support new enterprise within Sherborne and within Dorset as a whole. But the commercial arm to the premises will act as an engine room to generate sufficient funds and to enable these premises over time to become self-sufficient, as well as to pay for the running costs of the Sherborne. And that is why the application is presented to you in the way that it has. The management team at the Sherborne will be led by Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee has 30 years experience in the hospitality the hospitality sector, and he has held premises licenses in the past, and he is also a personal license holder, and he will be charged with delivering the vision that Mr. Cannon had for these premises. And as I said earlier, the premises aim to open in 2024. The premises will provide employment for up to 30 people on a full and part-time basis. Planning, I appreciate, is a separate regime, but for the record and for the sake of completeness, planning was applied for in September 2020 and was granted in May 2021. I'm not going to get drawn too heavily into policy. You'll know your own policy and you'll know what it says and you know what it tries to achieve. But I just want to raise one point about your policy. As all good policies do, it seeks to integrate various strategies across Dorset as a council. So it doesn't just look at licensing in isolation. It will look to planning. It will also look to your wider council plan and to the economic growth strategy. And just, I picked out in my submissions, and I do want to read these out again for the sake of the record, is that there is a line within the council plan that states government funding to local councils has reduced every year for over a decade now. And the reality is that the council cannot continue to provide everything residents, businesses and visitors want and need. So it is more important than ever that the council find the best way of working together. We will do more to support and enable voluntary and charitable organisations who are providing valuable help and support and making a positive difference to our communities. And that's within your council plan, creating stronger, healthier communities. And then within your economic growth strategy, one of the lines, there are three priorities of your economic growth strategy: to enhance Dorset as a place to do business and attract inward investment, to support creation and growth of new sustainable businesses, and enhance aspirations and skills to improve social mobility. And the proposal supports one of the key sectors of tourism and leisure, investment to improve the Dorset offer, improving visitor experience, productivity and quality employment opportunities. So everything that the Sherborne Arts Trust is trying to create is very much aligned with the wider council policies that are set out in your licensing policy. In advance of the application, we engaged in some significant pre-application consultation with the licensing authority and also with the responsible authorities. That was back in April of this year, and a site meeting was held on the 18th of May when Mr. Lee showed around a couple of your officers. As a consequence of the pre-application consultation, two things happened. Firstly, we enhanced the as part of the pre-application consultation, we sent a draft operating schedule to your officers and to the responsible authorities. Two things happened following the visit. Firstly, the operating schedule was enhanced, and so there were more conditions added to the licence in recognition of some of the feedback that we made. And also as a consequence of the wider consultation that we had with some of the residents, the terminal hour for the provision of licensable activities was brought back. And the aspiration originally was for a terminal hour of 2 o'clock in the morning, and after careful consideration. And this is without anybody asking us to do it or telling us or suggesting to us that it was perhaps the right thing to do. And the terminal hour was brought back to 1 in the morning, and that's where we've got to today. And the operating schedule and the basis on which this application is made, I think appears at page 39 of the supplementary bundle. I'm not going to take you to that in any great detail. I may highlight a couple of conditions in there. But the application was subsequently submitted and, as you've heard, has been correctly advertised both in the local press, on site, and served on all of the responsible authorities. Having said I'm not going to take you to the operating schedule, can we just go to that now? It's on page 39 of the supplementary bundle. I have provided you with a brochure, and you'll have seen the brochure about the premises. I'm not going to take you through that, but it hopefully gives you a sense of what the Trust are trying and looking to achieve in restoring these premises. And if there are any questions on the brochure, then of course we will answer those as best we can. But if I can take you to page 39, if I can find it, of the supplementary, there we go. So at page 39 is the operating schedule, and that sets out the hours and the conditions that we are applying for today. The premises, the intention of the premises is that there will be flexibility to enable them to open from 7 in the morning until 1:30 the following morning, with the sale of alcohol, the provision of regulated entertainment until 1 in the morning, and late night refreshment between 11 o'clock at night and 1 in the morning, as your officer has set out. And then the usual relaxation for hours on New Year's Eve. All of that is subject to a condition that appears within the operating schedule that all licensable, and this appears at condition 4 on page 40 of your supplementary bundle. Save for pre-arranged events and private functions, the sale of alcohol and the provision of licensable activities will cease at 2300 hours. So on a day-to-day basis, the licensable activities will cease at 2300 hours. But for pre-arranged functions, and those might include weddings, celebrations, awards ceremonies, and we've all probably been to events of that nature, my clients would like the flexibility to enable the premises to open until 1. And I understand that that is where the concern comes from the local residents. And just on that point, can I give them the comfort that these premises are not, and this will not hopefully surprise you, going to operate as a late night nightclub all day, every day of each week of the year. These are for private pre-booked events and functions, and will be very much in keeping with the style and nature of the premises. And the driver, of course, behind all of the activity in the premises is the trust and the provision of arts that I explained earlier. But the commercial activity is the engine room that enables these premises not to be reliant on state funding or handouts from the lottery or from English Heritage or wherever else that may come from, but is to enable these premises to operate on a self-sufficient basis. And so there will be an element of commercial activity, but it will be in keeping with the style and nature of the premises. And it goes again without saying that it is important for the Sherborne that it remains a key part of Sherborne and the wider community. And my clients have gone to great efforts to engage with the local community in advance of this application, not only this application, but also planning. It has become apparent, and for this, I'm apologising on my client's behalf. It's a genuine apology that certain residents were not engaged in this process in the way that they should have been. But rest assured that from this point onwards, is that we will make every effort to engage with them, not only up to the opening of the premises, but also when the premises open to ensure that their amenity is not impinged by the operation of the premises. All regulated entertainment, all licensable activities will cease outside at 11 o'clock. So if you are attending a wedding that goes on beyond 11 o'clock, and the fact that we've applied for a license till 1 doesn't necessitate that every wedding will go on until 1 o'clock in the morning. It may be 12 o'clock, it may be 1 o'clock, but my clients require that flexibility to enable them I've made the point already twice now about the self-sufficiency of these premises. Insofar as smokers are concerned, there is a courtyard within the building where smokers can go if people do want to have a smoke, so they don't need to go and stand outside. I know that you've probably got experience of matters that come before you as a committee where people who congregate outside having a cigarette. I apologise that I might have been one of those going outside to have a cigarette. I'm not the one who's making the noise, but it does generate noise, but that's not required. We don't need to have smokers outside. They can be within the premises themselves because there is a courtyard. But the whole of the operating schedule is centred around an operating management plan, and that appears at condition 5. And I have set out some of the headings within the operating management plan. That's not an exhaustive list, but it's there to give you as a committee an indication of the sorts of plans and policies that you would naturally expect to be contained within an operating management plan. The operating management plan will be living documents. They will be reviewed and revised as necessary. They will be shared with the licensing authority. They will be shared with all of the responsible authorities, so whether that's the environmental health officer, the police, and your trading standards, or whoever it is, they will have access to the operating management plan. And as an overriding condition, the premises license holder must comply with the operating management plan. And we've enclosed with the presentation a couple of documents. I'm going to come to those very shortly, but they will be developed over time. The premises, as I say, are not opening until April next year, so there is time for all of these policies to be developed, finessed, and the moment the premises open, these documents don't just sit on a shelf and gather dust. They will be developed over time and tweaked and changes made to them as is necessary, whether that's from feedback from the local residents, whether that's from feedback from your licensing officer, the environmental health officer, or indeed the police. And then, as I say, I'm not taking you through the whole of the operating schedule, but there are conditions in relation to the prevention of crime and disorder, and those appear at pages 41 and 42. Conditions in relation to public safety at page 43, and then conditions for the prevention of public nuisance and the protection of children from harm at pages 43 and 44. Your officer has kindly confirmed that there are no representations from any of the responsible authorities. During the statutory consultation process, the only responsible authority with whom we had any significant engagement was your environmental health officer, and that appears at paragraph 41 of my submissions. And he raised 3 issues in relation to light pollution and waste disposal. Both of those were satisfactorily dealt with in exchange of correspondence that we had. Light pollution is specifically dealt with under the planning permission, and the planning condition in relation to light pollution has been discharged. Insofar as waste disposal is concerned, the site is designed with a service yard, and any waste can be tided away for deliveries and collections, which will take place during normal delivery hours. The only query that the environmental health officer had, and the only change that he had requested in relation to the operating schedule, was an addition to the noise management plan with the inclusion of the words, this will include monitoring of noise levels at the nearest residential premises and noise levels adjusted accordingly. And again, that was a condition that we were, I think I may even have suggested the wording, but we agreed between ourselves that that was the most appropriate condition to place on the license. None of the responsible authorities have made any comments on this application to either restrict the proposed hours of operation, nor have they requested that additional conditions be added to the operating schedule. And we say that that is key. Of course, save for that minor amendment that I've just referred to insofar as the environmental health officer is concerned. And the last bit of policy that I'm going to refer you to is the Section 182 guidance that's issued to licensing authorities. Is issued by central government, and at paragraph 9.2, I've set out the totality of paragraph 9.2, and I shall just read the first 2 lines from that. Each responsible authority, so the police environmental health officer, for example, will be an expert in their respective field, and in some cases, it is likely that a particular responsible authority will be the licensing authority's main source of advice in relation to a particular licensing objective. For example, the police have a key role in managing the nighttime economy and should have good working relationships with those operating in their local area. The police should therefore be the licensing authority's main source of advice on matters relating to the promotion of crime and disorder objective. And so it follows that the environmental health officer will be your main source of advice when it comes to the licensing objective of the prevention of public nuisance. And the applicant, or we as my clients and I on their behalf, say that it is of significance that none of the responsible authorities has made a representation to the application, nor have they sought to change the proposed hours of operation or seek substantive changes to any of the conditions. And that is a conclusion that should weigh heavily on your mind when you go and consider the application later. The application has attracted representations from 3 local residents, 2 of whom are here today, and I've had an opportunity, as has Mr. Lee, to speak to them very briefly in advance of this hearing. And again, I've said in my submissions, and I will say it again, is that we do apologise to those residents who have made representations who don't feel that they have been part of a wider consultation in relation to this application and also possibly in relation to planning. If there's an oversight on my client's behalf, then I hope that they will accept that apology, but they will be engaged going forward as we move towards opening in April 2024. But Mr. Lee, and if you want to hear from him, I'm sure he will tell you, has done very wide and significant consultation with residents within Sherborne itself. So we have not ignored the local community, but we apologise for missing those that, who have made representations today. I think it's fair to say, and if I've misread this, I apologise, that the concerns of the local residents are in relation to public nuisance. And so we have sent through to the committee 2 policies in relation to noise management and dispersal. They are very much first cut, first draft policies. And when the premise is open, the noise management plan and the dispersal plan will look very, very different to those that have been presented to you today. But I thought it was important to show you as a committee and also the residents that work has started on that. As I say, they're in draft format. The operating management plan is, of course, subject to ongoing subject scrutiny. And whilst my clients, both through the planning process and the development of the premises, and I know from having dealt with applications up and down the country where you have new premises where there's a lot of building work going on, it is disruptive for the local community. But unfortunately, in trying to achieve the vision and the aim that we are trying to achieve, that is sometimes unavoidable. We are sensitive to the concerns of the local residents, but it is key to the ongoing success of the Sherborne that they are fully engaged in this project. I think there were 2, just very quickly, comments that were raised by one of the residents about car parking. There is no on-site car parking for guests and visitors to events at the Sherborne. And in due course, as the website is developed, if there are events at the premises, there are so many different ways now. I'm of an age that before the internet didn't exist, you didn't have WhatsApp groups, you were unable to communicate with people through electronic means, and it was all done by, it wasn't quite done on vellum, but it was done on paper and all the rest of it. But people will be directed to car parks within Sherborne if they're attending an event, and so it will be the Newlands car park. It'll be the Culverhays car park as well. So people will know not to try and park at the Sherborne, and they will know where to go and where to park their cars. When people leave at the end of the evening, any taxis that are coming to pick people up, there's a gate to the, I think it's the west gate. Cars will come in that direction, turn around and go out the west gate. The east gate is primarily for deliveries only. If you are getting married at the Sherborne, then that is where the bridal car will drive up, and then you will get dropped off at the front of the house. But the eastern gate will not be used as an access point for vehicles at all. And then I think the other question, and these are not matters that are strictly relating to licensing, but I'm answering them in the interest of openness, transparency, and sense, hopefully give the residents sense that we are fully engaged in this. We are listening to what they've said was about when will the staff leave. And the staff will leave when the events end. And that may be at 11 o'clock at night, or it may be after 1 o'clock in the morning. But it depends very much on the nature of the events. But all of this is against the backdrop of trying to bring back into use what is a beautiful building in the vision that Mr. Cannon had about how these premises should be should ultimately be put to use, but acutely aware of the sensitivity of its location and of engaging with the local community. Because if the local community are not engaged in this, and that's not just the people who live, thank you, I'm normally told to quieten down. It's not just the people who live in the immediate vicinity, but it's the wider community of Sherborne, and they are key, and we have to keep them on side. And I would invite, I hopefully have an opportunity right at the end to draw everything together, and I won't repeat anything that I've said already. But I would invite you to grant the application as presented to you. There are, as I say, no representations from the responsible authorities. The flexibility of the licence is required to enable my clients to deliver on the promises that they have made to the planning authority, to the promises they made to Historic England, and also to deliver on the vision that Mr. Cannon had for these premises. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. That's very helpful. Colleagues, questions?
Yeah, just one question, and that is in regard to the outside area. You say the outside area, there'll be no entertainment outside after 11 o'clock. Will people still be able to take their drinks out and sit out there?
You'll have seen Mr. Lee nodding his head, saying, oh, sorry, shaking his head, I apologise, that people won't be able to take their drinks out after 11 o'clock at night. There is the plans, and it's not a criticism because the nature sometimes of plans are not that clear, but there is a courtyard in the middle of the premises so that if people do need some fresh air, then that's where they can go.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification, if I could, so to understand the variation for New Year's Eve. I was just wondering if the applicant could explain the interrelationship or not between the condition or the term and allow for outside entertainment at 11 o'clock and the New Year's Eve opening. So in short, would there be regulated entertainment outside after 2300 on New Year's Eve?
I think it's there we go. I think it's unlikely. If you'll recall that back at the millennium there was a change in the legislation that enabled all licensed premises to stay open from the start of operating or opening hours on New Year's Eve right through to the close of operating hours on New Year's Day. So it's a period of about 36 hours. Now, I don't want to scare anybody with that, but the reality is that premises operate. It was just to give people some flexibility on New Year's Eve. Again, it is unlikely that there will be regulated entertainment outside after 2300 hours on New Year's Eve. And I can say probably with a fair amount of certainty is that these premises will not be open from 7 in the morning on New Year's Eve through to 1 o'clock on what would then be the 2nd of January. But it's just a way that applications are presented to licensing committees. And whatever happens at these premises on a New Year's Eve will be very much in keeping with the type and style of the premises as a whole. I hope that answers does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. The answer is possible, but unlikely.
And I was just going to pick up on that. You say it's unlikely to happen. And I'm sure, as with both of you as legal people, unlikely doesn't mean yes, it doesn't mean no. It's sort of sitting in the middle. So I think for the people that are observing this meeting and interested in what goes on, the decisions, for me, it's a yes or a no, or it's on these occasions only.
I think it's very hard. I mean, these premises, the first new year that these premises will be open will be 2024, so I've completely lost track of time. And so it's very difficult for us to say what we will be doing on New Year's Eve. And I apologise, but the best I can say is it's unlikely. If there was going to be some regulated entertainment outside the premises after 11 o'clock at night on a New Year's Eve, we would, of course, let all of the local residents and the local community know what was going to happen on a New Year's Eve.
I think the point I'm coming from here is, and I appreciate you're still drawing up your operating management plan at this time, and it's a living document. What we wouldn't want you to do, should this application be approved, is to be planning something that the licence hasn't covered. So we just need to make sure that whatever you're looking to do is covered appropriately and conditioned in the licence. When you say likely, does that mean I'm trying to tighten it up a bit so that the licence covers? I think you probably know what I'm trying to get at there is I wouldn't want you to talk yourself out of something that you do need.
I wouldn't want you to exclude entertainment outside on a New Year's Eve for one night of the year. So it's not going to be going on until 4, 5, 6 in the morning, but it may go on until shortly after midnight. And it's not uncommon for licensed premises on New Year's Eve to put on something slightly different or special, not different, but special for that one night of the year. And I think that's sort of an accepted way. But whatever they do, it's going to be done in such a way that is, and I've said this already, but it would always be in keeping with the vision of the premises, the underpinning charitable intentions of the trust, and not done in such a way as to alienate the local community. But I can't commit to you today to say that there may be, it's not going to be Led Zeppelin in the garden after midnight, and it's going to be something that will be probably much softer. There may be a small band. I simply don't know, and Mr. Lee doesn't know either. But what I wouldn't want to do is to exclude that opportunity if for that one night of the year, for a brief period of time, either side of midnight, to exclude that opportunity.
Yeah, my colleague just raised the point about, will you be having fireworks, for example, at midnight on New Year's Eve? Is that something that you would be considered with all the pops and the bangs that goes with it?
Fireworks, again, I suppose 2 points. One is we don't know at the moment. Fireworks are not a licensable activity. I appreciate that that may have some impact on the local residents. If there was going to be fireworks in the garden, it is the sort of thing that the residents would be told about, so that they would know. And I know that, I mean, I don't live in Sherborne, but I live in, where I live, near a public park, and whenever there is going to be a fireworks display, there is a letter drop to the local community. And it is the sort of thing that the local community would be told about.
Thank you. Phil, have you got enough? Are you clear on this particular matter? You happy with it? Thank you.
Yeah, I realise that fireworks weren't a licensed activity, but it's noise related, which is what I was referring to.
Oh, sorry, I'm being too quick. So you're absolutely right, because as I was speaking, I was thinking what sorts of things happen on New Year's Eve, and of course fireworks have obviously become a thing, and they can be intrusive, and again, if, and it is an if, there was going to be a display of some description. We're not talking the London Eye, but if there was going to be a display, then of course the local community would be told that that is what's going to happen. But that's all part of the communication and the communication plan with the local community, which I think it's fair to Mr. Lee and Mr. Pittman is that they have done a lot of engagement with the local community. That will continue, and it will only get better as the premises move towards opening.
Coming on to communication, how do you plan to set up that communication with emails, mobile numbers, so people can get in touch with you if there's an issue?
I'll leave Mr. Lee to answer on the specifics of that. But when I wrote to the 3 local residents the moment we receive the representations, it's our practice and advice to our clients is that you should, some people may just stick their head in the sand and think, well, we're going to take a runner on this. We engaged with the local residents straight away, and I have said to each of the residents that we engaged with that if you're happy, we will add your name to the list of people, the circulation email list. And I know that one of the residents has already passed Mr. Lee her email address, and so she will be part of that communication process. One of the residents has said, subject to the outcome of this application, it's a yes or a no, and I can't, and I apologise, I can't recall what the third resident has said, but we now have their we now have their details. I mean, this sounds really insidious. We know where they live and we have their contact details, and so we will make every effort to communicate them. But if Mr. Lee's got anything else to add, then
we will just endeavour to widen the area that we communicate with. We have communicated with the people on the top wall, the Portman residents. Unfortunately, some of the representations here today are from the Manor House development, the eastern side, and unfortunately, they've sort of weren't properly consulted. But going forwards, we will, I can assume, just draw concentric lines of residents we feel that will be in the firing line, for want of a better word, and we will communicate directly with them via leaflet drops or email, mobile telephone numbers, etc. But of course, the telephone number for Sherborne House itself will be in the public domain, and there will be management on duty whenever the building is in operation, and that number can be called if there are any concerns being placed.
Mr. Lee, thank you for that. But would you consider that your person in charge has the mobile phone with the number in that is available to the public? And would you consider setting up a community group, interest group, for those people around who may want to have a part of, and actually, be part of the house and supporting it if this application is approved?
Of course, we'd be amenable to that. If I'm not on site, then I will have very able deputies on site, and then the calls can be pushed through to their mobile numbers necessarily. I would be loath to have my family time with young children deferred to if there is somebody that's equally as responsible that can deal with those decisions. But yes, I will very much want to engage in any means possible.
Thinking of your family time being interrupted, but I was thinking the person in charge at the time of an event being held and can communicate with the community.
100%, yes.
Thank you for questions. Anything else? No. You've asked for the licence to start at 7 o'clock in the morning. Are you opening up for hot dogs and burgers at 7 in the morning, or is there a plan there, or what do you envisage there?
There's always a sort of slight conflict between the opening hours of the premises and then the hours that you ask for licensable activities, and different people take different views. But the premises may open at 7 in the morning. The restaurant on the ground floor, which is to the western side of the building, may open for breakfast. I think it would probably be a little bit more sophisticated than burgers and hot dogs. I take your point, but the bistro and the restaurant may well be open at 7 in the morning for people who want to come in and have a morning coffee or a pastry. But the licensable activities, the bar doesn't open until 10. And the regulated entertainment doesn't start till 10, and obviously late night refreshment is not until 11 o'clock at night. But if there was a breakfast event, there might be a business breakfast event in the morning, that just enables the premises to open at 7 in the morning for people to come in.
Thank you. That answers my question nicely. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to go around the room now and see if anybody's got questions. And apologies, I should have offered the opportunity to question the licensing officer, the officer. So, do you have any more questions at the moment? No. Members of the public, do you have any questions? And it's just questions for the licensing officers themselves, the report author, at this moment. I'll come back to you in a minute otherwise.
I don't think I've got a question for the licensing officer. Oh, I'm sorry. Not used to this.
No, I haven't got a question for the licensing officer.
Thank you, everybody. Roy, do you have any questions for the applicant at all? Do you have any questions, and I mean questions at this moment for the applicant, any of you? We will give you the opportunity shortly to say and have your words of what you want to say, but this is particularly, do you have questions?
I do have a question. Have the residents of Manor Court Housing Association been contacted by the applicants? For the benefit of people in the room, Sherborne House is here. Here is the garden wall for our properties. Sherborne Council car park. There's a big wall that goes along the parallel with the east side of Sherborne House, and on the other side of that, there is a large housing association development. Have those people been contacted in any way? I only bought my house on the 28th of July. I bought it from the deceased estate. The deceased died last November. My lawyer received nothing from her lawyer about the consultation. So the first I knew was the day before I went to America that a license application was being applied for till 1 in the morning. And I just wondered whether my neighbours on the other side have been contacted. But I certainly didn't receive anything of the recent consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very much. I understand the question. It's not really relevant here for part of our consideration, is it, Roy? No, I don't think it's really relevant what the communication is. Ideally, and we'll ask them the question to answer in a minute, it's good community and helps the community have better links with each other, but they don't have to communicate with them. But I will put the question, and they've heard the question now, and I'll get the applicant to answer.
Yeah, again, with the 28-day consultation period for any new premises licence, there are only a few things that an applicant will need to do. So you've got the advertising at the premises, advertising in the local newspaper, which in this case they sent it off with the Western Gazette, and we would have it on our website. All those 3 things were met. They do not have to consult with nearby residents and neighbours. If they choose to, that's their choice, but by law they don't have to. It's different to planning. Planning obviously would.
Could you hear that answer, that they have complied with what they needed to do, but it's good practice to do more if they can, is the outcome. Would you like just to answer that question, please?
I wouldn't want you to be left with the impression that we've simply done the bare minimum on this, because there is, again, planning obviously and licensing are separate regimes, but there will have been a lot of engagement as part of the planning process. I'm going to let Mr. Lee tell you about who he has engaged with locally in the local community. I apologise again, and Mr. Lee's made that apology that we should, in hindsight, spoken to those local residents. We didn't, we apologise. And if, as and when the premises move towards opening, it's a hard hat area at the moment, but once it moves out of that, more than happy to give the local community, and they will be invited around to see the premises before they open and be given a much fuller indication of what it is that's going to be planned. But if I can let Mr. Lee just explain to you, and it may be that Mr. Pittman's got a few things, I can hear them whispering behind me, to add to that about the level of local engagement. But please don't think that we have not engaged with the local community, because it has been critical to the development of the project.
On the pre-application, I asked and made contact with people in the area I knew that ran or oversaw bodies of residents, one being a gentleman who runs the resident association for the Portman estate, which is to the north of the building. I probably wrongly assumed that that would have encompassed the applicants from the Manor Stables development, etc. But we engaged very much with them. There were lots of queries, and I think we quelled them because people thought it was going to be a late night, noisy venue, but on showing them what we're trying to achieve and showing them facilities that we have, they understood that the commercial activities are very well considered. And the last thing we want to do is to create issues, because for an ongoing management procedure, if we've got people that are unhappy left, right, and centre, it's not conducive to running the business. So I also consulted various residents along the Newlands side, both to the east and the west. But obviously, we missed some people, which is regrettable. I do know Mr. Pittman is going to talk about the engagements he's had with the planning side as well, but it already goes part and parcel of the communication that we've tried to have with the local community.
Hello, yes, Okay, that's fine. I was just going to add very briefly, obviously there's been the planning process and I won't go into that detail. We were also invited by the Friends of Sherborne House, which is a community group that was established some years ago in order to try and save the building, unsuccessfully, unfortunately. We were invited by them, Jeremy and I, to speak at the Digby Hall in front of a full building with some possibly a few hundred people in there to discuss the aspirations of the building project, as well as thereafter the running of the building and the venue where some of these things were discussed. And we, as lead consultants, have also been in discussions with the local councillors and some of the local residents too.
Thank you all. That's very helpful. Thank you. Does that answer your question as best as you? Thank you very much. Right, we'll leave where we are now. Right, Mr. and Mrs. Oswald, would you like to say your piece, please, and say your view, what your opinions are?
I think flexibility for Sherborne House is uncertainty for residents. So while I understand that they want flexibility, it's quite disconcerting just to hear, well, we don't quite know how many times it will be or how long something will go to, because that's, I mean, for us, that's just saying, well, we don't really know what's going to happen. So it's quite hard to object to something when someone's saying, well, we don't really know what's going to happen. I think for me, it is the 1 o'clock in the morning, just seems too late for what we thought was an art centre. And I'm very supportive of an art centre, and all the neighbours are. I've not met a neighbour who isn't supportive of that. But the idea that it needs a liquor licence until 1 o'clock in the morning came as quite a surprise to me. And we, Manor House Stable residents weren't consulted, and we are very, very close, just over the wall. I mean, we're as close as you could be. So, I mean, it is a concern. And there's nothing really that's said that makes me feel that I shouldn't be concerned about the noise problem. So it remains a concern. Did you want to add in?
No, that's correct. We're not concerned about one day New Year's Eve, or I'm personally not anyway. It's what happens on a 7-day basis, because potentially 5 days out of those 7 days could be late. We just don't know. There's no regulation there. And the noise of people leaving from 1 o'clock onwards, including staff, with their cars, which would be internal, would possibly be very disruptive. So just as Wendy said, it's the unknown of it could happen 5 or 6 days in a particular week, or might not happen at all. It's very sort of, well, there's no real thing there, and the noise is just one wall away from us. So it's and the music events, I do admit we don't know what the noise would be from something like a music event, as well as people leaving. So there's a lot of unknowns there, and that's part of our concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Applicants, do you have any questions for Mr. and Mrs. Osmond at all? Roy, do you have any questions? Thank you. Mrs. Balisat.
First of all, could I say how hugely supportive I am of the development of Sherborne House? I think it's a wonderful thing for the town. I think it's a wonderful thing for Dorset. But it is surrounded by quite dense housing on most sides. And Newland, on the south side of the house, is very quiet in the evening. You can hear a pin drop. You don't have much vehicular traffic. I think that's true. My objection is to a liquor license, with the exception of New Year's Eve, going on until 1 o'clock in the morning. I think a license until 11 o'clock with half an hour sweeping up is more than enough. I understand that it is primarily an art centre. I understand that success of the commercial arrangements is needed to fund this. But I think 1 o'clock in the morning license will cause a huge amount of noise disturbance. Sound will travel. The Oswells and I live over the wall. In the summer months, when there are likely to be more weddings than in the winter months, I will not be able to open my bedroom window, no matter how hot it is, because of possible noise. I'm not going to repeat the argument. I just think 1 o'clock in the morning is too much. And there's just one point that I would like for the record. I have been told on more than one occasion that the licenses were properly displayed. But for the record, I would like to say that the pavement adjacent to the front wall of Sherborne House has been blocked off. And either end, there are notices on the pavement saying pedestrian access blocked, or words to that effect. And you can see it's a great big notice about that size in red, and you cross the road. So I am saying that the notices, okay, I didn't see the Western Gazette, I don't look at the council website, but for the local residents, they missed us, and we're probably the closest neighbours. And I haven't had a clear explanation about what effort was made with the Manor Court residents. So I object to 1 o'clock in the morning, with the exception of New Year's Eve. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I recognise that, but I think I am impressed, and I'm very grateful for you all coming along today to be part of this hearing, because it's important. But even, I mean, you were so organised, but even the board member wasn't organised to get himself to speak in time. So you were very organised to be here on time. So thank you.
I think it says a lot that there are only 3 of us here today in terms of community consultation. Not that people aren't going to be worried and disturbed by noise nuisance, but they weren't aware. Thank you.
With respect, this is the normal number we would get here for people on this sort of thing. So I'm going to go around and get people. Mr. Osmond, have you got any questions for Mrs. Balasat at the moment? Thank you. Anybody got any questions? Roy? Okay, colleagues, any questions?
No, I've listened to
Okay, heard enough.
what they've said, yeah.
Okay, what I'm going to do go reverse round in a minute and just check if anybody else wants to sum up and say anything else to give the people a chance. What I would say before we go further than that, you've raised your objections, and thank you for coming and raising your objections. I've been involved in the legal world for quite a few years now, and the one thing I'm impressed with is the Licensing Act. It is a very powerful, very responsive act, and the team of Dorset Council are very good at picking up. So if there are issues, if they're evidenced and substantiated, they would be brought before a committee and the appropriate decisions will be taken. And I know my colleagues, your colleagues here, would be aware of that. And it doesn't take very long for a licence to be reviewed if there are issues behind it. So please be reassured that if there are problems, they could be reviewed. And I think that my colleagues, on the people on the bench would recognise that the Act does work. So we're going to go around. Mrs. Balasat, is there anything else you'd like to say to sum up today, please?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Mr. and Mrs. Osmond?
No.
No, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. McGregor and your team.
Thank you for that, Chair. I've set out in my submissions my conclusions, and I've given a number of reasons why we feel that the application should be granted. And you've already picked up on one of those points. And I don't think I've appeared in this authority on a review of a licence, but where there are issues with premises, and you will have seen those that come back before you, where there are genuine issues with premises that can't be resolved through a process of engagement, either with the officer or with the local community, then they do come back before committee for review. Licensing is all about proportionality, and the question for you is, this application by this applicant at these premises likely to promote the licensing objectives? As I say, licensing is all about proportionality, and the applicant, we would say, has adopted a proportionate and reasonable response, particularly in relation to the not concerns, but the points that were made to them following the pre-application consultation with your officers, which resulted in a much more significant operating schedule being presented to you today, and also a voluntary reduction in the proposed hours of operation. And I have highlighted at paragraphs 57 and 58 two parts of the national guidance. I'm not going to read it, but you will see it, and your legal advisor will have seen the guidance that I've referred to. And then at 59, there is a case called Thwaites. And again, I'm not going to take you to the detail of that. But what the authority, in essence, says, what the authority cannot be asked to do is speculate. And that's in relation to concern or fear. And you've heard about concerns or the fears of the local residents, and the comment that there will be a huge amount of noise disturbance, but a comment that is unsupported by any evidence. And you can draw a significant inference from the fact that none of the responsible authorities have made representations to this application for all the reasons that I made earlier. If they had concerns about the applications presented to you today, then they would have made a representation, or they would have asked for the hours to be cut back, or they would have asked for further conditions to be added to the licence, and they have not. We say that that is significant. But I'm going to highlight just a small, half a dozen of the key points in relation to this application. The applicant and I've set out the background to these premises for how long they've been vacant, seeks to bring back into use a significant and important at-risk historic building in Sherborne, and that previous attempts to bring it back to use failed due to lack of public funding. And to enable the premises to become self-sufficient, an element of commercial enterprise is required. We're not answerable to shareholders. There's a trust that oversees the running and management of the premises, and it just needs to be self-sufficient. It doesn't need to drive profit, but there is a small element of commercial enterprise that is required to enable that to happen. I'm not going to read out, as I say, every aspect of the reasons at paragraph 60 of my submission, but the application is supported by a comprehensive schedule of conditions. As I've said, none of the responsible authorities have sought to alter, amend or add conditions, nor have any of the responsible authorities sought to change the hours. There is a secondary lockstep to the application, given that the operational management plan will be subject to ongoing scrutiny by your officers and also by the responsible authorities. And as you have said, that if these premises do not deliver on the promises that they've made to the trust, to deliver Mr. Cannon's vision, to the promises that they've made to the planning authority, to the promises that they've made to Historic England, then of course this licence can be subject to a review. But we are confident that with full cooperation of the responsible authorities, wider and continued engagement with the local residents, that we will not appear back before you. And so I would invite you to grant this application to enable these premises to come back into use. It'll be a huge asset for Sherborne, and it'll be something that Dorset, as a county as a whole, can be very proud of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGregor and your team. Roy, Aileen, anything else you want to add or say? So I just want to clarify that we cannot assume that there might be antisocial behaviour. We cannot assume there will be loud noise or people leaving. We can only deal with what actually has happened. And we know that at the moment, due to the house being closed, there hasn't been anything there. So we can't consider anything we can't assume anything. We have to deal with fact. Okay? Does anybody else want to say anything at all, or anybody feel that they've not had the opportunity to speak? I just don't want anybody going away from here feeling that they haven't had the opportunity to say something and Roy's just remembered something.
It was more the case of, obviously, we don't know what's going to happen, but for those who have made representations, if something does happen when the building does open, then they've got our details. They can contact us whenever. Again, with environmental health, just contact the council if it ever does become a problem. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Balasat.
Can I ask what evidence would be required? I was living in London until recently, and when there is unacceptable noise, Kensington and Chelsea Council had a noise abatement officer who used to whiz round on his scooter and listen for himself. What evidence would be required should there be a problem? Thank you.
It depends on the nature of what you've got, and I couldn't tell you what evidence would be needed, but it would be to support the issue that there is a problem, whatever that may be. Roy, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, noise would always be investigated by environmental protection, as in with the Section 182 guidance. We would obviously leave that to them to do a noise investigation, so they would have their diary sheets, noise recording equipment. There is a review that can be done, but then there's also the powers under the Environmental Health Act, which is a noise abatement notice. But I'm not an environmental health officer. I couldn't give details of what they require as an evidence to do that. But that's the kind of the standards that they do, which is obviously part of their investigation. And they can review a licence on the behalf if there is becoming a noise issue.
Thank you, everybody. Has everybody had the chance now? Speak now, as they say, or forever. Okay. Phil, have we covered all the points?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. In which case, the public part of the meeting will now conclude. The subcommittee will consider its decision in private with the Democratic Services Officer in attendance and the legal advisor who may be called upon to give advice and guidance. The decision of the licensing subcommittee shall be communicated to all the parties and made available on the Council's website as soon as practicable and within the prescribed 5 working days. There is a right of appeal. Any party who wishes to appeal the decision has 21 days from the date of the receipt of this notice to submit an appeal to the Magistrates' Court. Thank you for attending, everybody. We appreciate all your time and for your coming along. We will now go into exempt business and deal with the matter. Thank you, everybody.